I'm Ken Dunn, and this is Bestseller Confessions. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling authors have an unfair advantage with their traditional publishers and their mega publicity and marketing budgets. It's just not fair. As a major crime detective and a police interrogator, I know how to get them to spill the beans. In the Bestseller Confessions podcast, I'll squeeze the secrets out of the best-selling authors and finally level the playing field for everybody. My next interrogation is waiting for me, so let's get started. Okay, welcome back. I'm super excited about the show that we have for you today. Thousands and thousands of independent and traditionally published authors are tuning into Bestseller Confessions because we bring you the truth. Today on the show, I'm joined by Dan Waldschmidt, and Dan Waldschmidt's story is fascinating to me. I think he's going to add a lot of value to us, and he definitely has some stuff that we need to pull out of him here. Dan has sold tens of thousands of copies of his book, Edgy Conversations. It's hit 3 international bestsellers lists, so he's definitely qualified to be here. But the best part of the story, I think, is the early days. Dan is known as the consultant to billionaires. In his early 20s, he founded a major tech company. By 25, he was the CEO of that company. He parlayed that into an international consulting practice. And I think I've got this right. He only consulted Fortune 500 companies. He did business in 16 countries. And Dan, if I understand properly, you only consulted for the big boys because they're the only ones that could afford to pay you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to offer my help to others, but it just, at the end of the day, they're the ones who have the biggest checkbooks. So they're the ones who get the help.
Hey, Dan, listen, we're going to go through this in stages, and we've got a lot of information that we definitely want to pull out of you. But let's go back to the beginning. The story goes from, 20-year-old tech company CEO, $100 million company, can parlay it into a consulting practice, and now you're on this mission to make the entire world edgy. How did this all start? Like, what was the beginning? What's the background behind this whole platform?
I was looking for the formula for what made the book, and I'm sure you've already shown the readers, but Edgy. This was really the manual I wrote after I needed it. I knew that I had this unique ability to kind of see things that other people didn't see. My perspective was different than others. And so from 2010 to 2014, I spent 4 years digging into that. Like, what is it? And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm searching for the wrong thing. I'm looking at me. What I really want to do is look at the genome, if I could find it, of successful people. I mean, how do ordinary people who are just, not born into rich families, just how do they achieve success? And then, of course, that's the 1,000+ stories that we condensed down into this book. It was really me searching for the formula. How does somebody who rolls out of bed on a Tuesday and they're frustrated because their boss is putting way too much pressure on them, they're stressed out because they want to do something else, they're not making enough money, maybe they're out of shape physically, and they've got all these pressures and stresses on their life, and they're just wanting to kind of level up. And I thought, well, how does that happen? What are the rules for those sort of people? And that became our giant laboratory.
But let's go back to the beginning of this story, though, because one of the things that stopped me when I was reading Edgy Conversations was the scene in your garage with a gun in your mouth. Yeah. So it sounds like a great intro to 25-year-old CEO, but there is something that happened in you between those early tech day successes and being led on the mission to write the book. Tell me about that period.
This was interesting too, because when I first started writing the book, and you get book offers and people want you to write, they want you to write a lot about the success part, right? How you made the most money and did that. What they want to leave out is the emotional baggage. But I think this is timely for those of you listening who are trying to level up either your writing game or writing that book for the first time. The real story behind all of this was, you hear people saying balance, you need balance. And I'm not sure I'm sold completely on this idea of balance, but look, you do have to understand that your greatest weapons can also be kind of a nuclear bomb in your life that destroys everything. So for me, I was single-minded, single-focused on getting to where I want to be. And from 19 to about 25, 26, that served me really well because I could go to work. get things done, stay longer than anybody else, be more focused than anyone else. And if you haven't figured it out already, I have a little bit of an obsessive personality. So, I'm never really stopping thinking or planning or working. I'm always doing that next thing. And so just the reason for the story, the opening of the book was to share that all of this began to take a really big toll. Took a huge toll on my marriage. Took a huge toll on those around me. So as I was building these things and doing these things, I created a lot of collateral damage. And what was frustrating for me, and I write a little bit about it in the book, and I often will talk about it one-on-one with individuals, is I knew how to work, but I didn't know this whole emotional area of myself. I wasn't really self-aware as I needed to be. And frankly, I wasn't, I was completely unprepared for being married, which means I'm not only self-aware for me, I'm self-aware for both of us, right? I was just completely, I was never taught that. I never even thought about it. All I thought about was achieving my goals, making money. That's it. That's the only thing that mattered. And, as I began to realize that I needed help in this area, that I was unprepared, I did just about everything wrong to try to fix it. Meaning, I probably could have had a couple candid conversations with my wife to try to sort things out. Instead, I kind of just decided I'm going to double down on the things that I'm really good at. By the way, this is a little bit of a lesson. In today's society, we talk a lot about, maximize your strengths, maximize your strengths. I maximized my strengths, but the problem was I maximized my strengths too much, and they became this nuclear bomb that just kind of destroyed everything in its path, including all the success that I'd built up along the way. And so as I write in that opening chapter, I kind of realized that things had to change dramatically, or I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to live this life. I guess that's the best way to say it. So something had to change. Either I had to decide that this was it, and obviously I didn't make that decision because you wouldn't have the book and you wouldn't have this interview. Or I had to radically change my life so that I could be happy. And at the end of the day, what's interesting, most people say they want money. Most people say I want awards and recognition, and I want to be the boss. I want these things. What they really want probably is a little bit of a self-fulfillment. They want a little bit of happiness. They want to feel like they've contributed to the world. And those are the lessons I've learned since then.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the book for a second. You first had the idea to write the book a few years ago, and obviously spent a lot of time. What's really unique for everybody that's listening, the book is a compilation of research and stories that Dan did to prove a point. It's kind of like an outliers for the edgy world, I think would probably be a good analogy.
Yeah.
But through that journey, Dan, you've obviously learned a lot, and this podcast is for authors. So let's actually talk about that journey you went through. You chose independent publishing versus traditional publishing, and you literally had several traditional offers, for this book. What was the thing that made you choose the independent route?
I've been a reader my whole life. In fact, the backstory behind why I was so driven in my early 19s and 20s was I had to read a book a day. It may sound crazy to people, but from the time I was 0 to the time I was 18 and went off to college, we never had a TV in our home at all. My parents were very religious. They made us read books. So I had to read books, and my parents also said you can't read fiction books because it's fake, fake news. So you have to read biographies. You have to read nonfiction. And I remember at 12, 13 years old, I was reading my dad's Blackstone law books, right? So, I mean, that's kind of what I had. So I knew books. I'd read a lot of books on it, but I wanted something different. And when I first got approached by publishers, they presented me these offers, and I was really excited. I mean, for many of you, getting a book deal, getting your book published, that's amazing. I mean, someone says, we're going to write, we're going to publish your book and we're going to market it, and they tell you all these wonderful things. That's the culmination of your dream, right? And then as I began to dig down into what they wanted to, what they were willing to do, I realized, this is the book I really want to write. For example, I wanted to write a book that was short and powerful. I mean, this book, you can see it's 180 pages, but it's pretty thin. They wanted a 300 plus page book on success.
Wow.
Because if it was heavier, it would sell more copies. And this is stuff, Ken, just because, you've been in the business for so long. But, as a new guy, I'm thinking, I wouldn't read a 300-page book. Why would anyone else? So we started digging into the details as we dug deeper. I said, I wanted color. I had to find an independent publisher who would let me actually write a book where this paper is silky smooth. And it's actually, you've got a lot of color inside the book. And just the end, I said I wanted illustrations. The book's full of illustrations. And as we went through, they said, well, we'll give you some pictures at the beginning of each chapter. And I said, well, what if I want to put a picture right in the middle? No, well, that's not how we do things. So as I began to dig into it, what I realized is, so they want a book that's edgy. They want a book that's going to sell a lot of copies. But at the end of the day, you're taking everything that would make this book sell lots of copies and you're stripping it out. So, and unfortunately, that's not something to go along with.
So you're a control freak. You needed it to be a very specific way.
Yeah, well, I had this vision, so I don't know that I'll ever write another book. I'm working on book number 2 right now, but if this is the only book that people ever hear from me or read from me, this is it. This is kind of my thing out there. I wanted it to be amazing. And in fact, we even looked at, of course, you can't see it on the video, but the cover is a special feel. It's embossed. It's 3 different layers on this cover. The pages side of like the magazine. And what I realized was, and I found an independent publisher who actually not think I was crazy. In fact, they said, oh, here's some other options you can do to make it even more impactful. So it was built so that viscerally across the room, you see the red. When you actually pick it up with your hands, you go, oh, that feels like rubber. That feels interesting. Even though it's a paperback, it feels. And then as you opened it up, you would see something different with pictures and colors. So it was meant to stand out. And so whether it's touch or sight, we couldn't get smells. We actually tried to get a book that had inks that had smells in it. The problem was later in the day, my eyes were burning. And I thought, why are my eyes burning? It was like jalapenos. All the ink had come off on my fingers and I'm rubbing my face. But that was the impact we wanted to create. And it took us a while to find a publisher who would say, okay, we can do that. And not only can we do that, but we're happy to help you instead of we're happy to fight you every step of the way.
So that sounds like it was more important to you than the actual work that was going to be involved in it. But let's talk about the work for a second, because being an independent author, obviously, if you find the right independent publisher to help you, they often now have really good understandings of publicity and marketing and helping.
Yeah.
The author has to do a lot more of the work. Let's look back at that experience through the launch of the book and the sales, because you've sold tens of thousands of copies. Do you regret going down the self-publishing route, the independent publishing route, now looking back?
No. In fact, if I do it, if book number 2 comes out, the only reason why I wouldn't do it is if someone gave me a release or an early wrote me a check for $500,000 or more. Then I would probably still stay independent. So you see the book here, and what you said earlier about doing your own marketing is important. Is not only do we write the book, we also wrote a workbook that comes along with it, and it was made of the same material. So as someone would go through each chapter, they could actually fill it out. And I know for all of you who are thinking, I want to be digital. We had a digital workbook as well, but there's something about having a sort of workbook go along with it. And not only that, but we had a monthly calendar to go along with that as well.
So I really get what you're saying about the artistic control and having other products and services. Most people that actually listen to Bestseller Confessions are listening to it. So what Dan's actually holding and showing for the viewers that are seeing this episode are actual copies of products that are absolutely beautiful. And I really get that. But I want to help self-published authors here. That's what my mandate is. So let's start to jump into the launch of this book now. Tell me the 3 or 4 most important things that were key to you becoming a best-selling author. The launch, the build-up, the publicity, your notoriety. What do you think it all boils down to?
Oh, there were a couple factors. One, I used my blog before I wrote a book to tease out these ideas. What was great, we started blogging in 2006. I didn't even start writing a book until 2010. I had 4 years worth of writing experience, and I wrote every day, generally. And sometimes it seemed crazy. Sometimes it resonated with people. But one was crafting the habit of writing. I think, is it Seinfeld who says he writes 1,000 words a day? Ken, the habit of writing just makes it better. You develop capabilities to do that. You also develop your own writing style. My style is very short, choppy sentences, almost a book full of tweetable, quotes. Makes it easy to read, and it's not these long flowing sentences that are a paragraph long. So number one, you develop your style. Number two, you develop your network. This is really powerful because one of the ways that I launched the book, and I'll tell you this secret in a second because Ken asked me to share this with all of you, was I developed my network. So by the time I started writing the book, I was already on these lists. As Dow Jones, Wall Street Journal had already said, Dan's blog is one of the top 7 blogs in the world. I was on, sales impact lists of top 5 sales experts, along with Grant Cardone. Some of the best guys in the world. I was already on these lists of top experts, and so I was already sharing kind of my wisdom, sharing my insights to the world. So too, I developed this network and developed relationships with people. So here's what's interesting to all of you. When Seth Godin wrote his book, his most recent book, this is 4 or 5 years ago now, I reached out to him and said, hey, I love this book. Could I do an interview with you? Almost like what's happening here. It was on video, and he said, sure. And then I said one step further, could I create like cut this into 4 or 5 videos and share it? And he said, yeah, sure, that's fine. So I got Seth Godin for an hour, and we talked through his book. And then I asked him some key questions, and that turned into 4 or 5 videos. And then what I did was I put that on our website, and so anyone who downloaded the blog or signed up for our newsletter, you don't download a blog, but when you grabbed our newsletter, I would say to you, let me send you my 5-part video series with Seth Godin. And so it automatically created credibility. And again, I was kind of young and too stupid to know maybe you don't ask all those questions, but I just said, would you let me do this? And he said, fine. So I was already building up this network. And that was important because relationships just make the difference between people promoting you or just going, yeah, I got another request for promotion. Let me throw this book on the counter and I'll move on. In my home office, my secretary will tell you that we receive books, 3 to 4 books, sometimes daily, but really weekly. And in those books, they're from publishers, the same guys who tried to give me an offer. And inside that hardcover is a sheet of paper. It's usually typed on, Dear Mr. Waldschmidt, we hope you'll share this with your 1 million people on Facebook and your 300,000 people on Twitter, blah, 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 nothing personal. And those books literally get set to the side and nothing done with them. And so I knew it was important that I take a personal interest in these people and they know my name so that down the line, when I needed something, I would have access to them. And the book was when I needed access to them.
Dan, let's get right into the launch now. We've got to stop messing around here. Authors want the truth from you. Let's talk about the build up to your launch, what happened during your launch, and why this book sold tens of thousands of copies. What did it?
So when I had built those relationships, I had already been developing a following through my writing and insights on the blog. And I decided to take a chance on this idea and think back 10 years ago when I was first formulating some of these ideas, giving gifts and kind of, reaching out to these experts and gurus was not something that was done. So I kind of thought, how would I get someone's attention and how could I get their help? See, I realized early on my network was limited. I had a certain size network. All of you listening have a certain size network. It's on your LinkedIn and Twitter. You combine all those together. That's the size of your network. That's all you get. But what if I could grab other people's networks as well and get them excited about this book that I was sharing? So I knew it had to be extraordinary. I went out and created what we called boxes of awesome. And the box of awesome was this box that we created. It was a red box, bright red on the outside. We had to get it custom ordered, had our logo, and it had, this is a box of awesome on the cover of it, on the top of it, almost like you would open up maybe some clothes you order in the mail. Think about a box like that. Inside, I had handmade in Pakistan some brown vintage leather boxing gloves. In the book, one of the stories is about one of the greatest boxing comeback stories of all time. I played off that angle and had these vintage brown leather boxing gloves made. Then after they came through customs, because customs held them up for a while, they wanted to make sure I wasn't getting anything illegally imported from Pakistan. When they finally arrived back, I created in my office 125 different boxes and went out to, in my mind, who were the top 125 experts in the sales, marketing, business, maybe a little bit of professional development space. John Jantz, Keith Ferrazzi, Seth Godin. The list goes on and on. You've heard those names and many others, right? And what I did was I did something radically different than anything I had ever received. I took the brown leather boxing gloves. I put them in there. And by the way, each boxing glove cost between $100 and $150, maybe as much as $200 if I count shipping. And they were brown leather on the strap that you would see a boxer pull across their wrist. It said, "Stay edgy, be awesome." So this wasn't something, unless you're completely heartless, you're not going to take these brown leather gloves in the trash. You're just not. You're going to want to use them. You're going to give them to your kids. They can punch each other in the head, whatever it is. I knew it was something that they were going to hold on to. I took those brown leather gloves, put them in a box, took the book, put the book in the box, took some of the other goodies, calendars, notepads. We had notepads made up, Tearaway, that actually our publisher said, "Yeah, we'll make those for you too." We had a bunch of notepads made up with it, said, notes of awesomeness and things like that. We put that in the box. We had posters put in the box that had different cool sayings on them. And then is when the hard work began, because I wrote 125 notes one by one by one. And what I did that was interesting was I literally took my book and I found a page in the book that was interesting and I ripped it out, just ripped it out. And then I took a black Sharpie and I wrote on that page. So the black Sharpie would of course be darker than the black words on the page. I wrote a note on that page out of the book and on the front and on the back usually, because it took a little bit of space. And I would just write and say, for example, "Hey Ken, Dan Waldschmidt here. I've enjoyed your friendship and I'm so glad that you're changing the world. I've written something that I think can change the world, but I'd love for you to take a look at it when you have time." Here's what's interesting. Let me stop here, because all of you think you know where the story ends, but you don't know. I never said, "Would you tweet it? Would you promote it? Would you Facebook it? Would you do a live interview with me?" I never asked for anything. I said, "Thank you for changing the world. This is my gift to you. I hope I get the rare chance to be like you and change the world." So I sent those out in about December. Coincidentally, in January, we knew our launch was going to be in February. Eventually, that launch, we got so busy, we had to push back to April. But in January, something else magical happened. I sent out these boxes of awesome. I wrote a blog post called "You Have to Do the Hard Things." I wrote this blog post just almost angry one day, because I thought, as I was writing this book, here all these people were trying to take shortcuts. I thought, man, when I really see successful people winning, it's because they do hard things. I wrote this blog post, 30 million views across the web. It was crazy. It went viral overnight, everywhere from Vanity Fair to Forbes. People were calling saying, "Can we republish? Can we interview you?"
All
so
right,
I sent out these boxes of awesome. Yeah.
Hold on. Let me interrupt you there. I get where you're going, but we need to keep you to the facts, because you're getting way down the road, and I wouldn't be an interrogator unless I hold you to task here. So to summarize where you're going with this, you went way overboard building a Dream 100 list and just throwing awesome at them.
Yeah.
What happened as a result of that?
So right after these boxes came out, there was probably 3-4 weeks of almost quietness. There was an occasional tweet. Someone would say, "Oh, look what I got in the mail from @DanWaldo." There was an occasional message on Facebook. Here's what happened about 4 weeks in. I had people messaging me, these really powerful people with huge networks. "This is great. I had a chance to look at your book. What do you want from me? How can I help you?" And now I knew the door was open to go do a ask. And so what ended up happening was we had a tremendous number, thousands and thousands and thousands of pre-orders ahead of our launch, which is why we actually moved the launch from February to April, so we could accommodate and be ready, because we weren't prepared for that. And by reaching out and providing this value to people and a little bit of mystery, a little bit of curiosity, we enabled people to really get on board, and we sold lots of books. And by the way, as an author, there's nothing better then having that first month be pretty sweet, right?
But
Comes next.
Hold on for a second. Hold on for a second. Slow the boats down. You sent out lots of these boxes, and different people were so impacted by what you sent them in the boxes that all kinds of amazing things happened, including a 10,000 unit pre-sale. So through your contacts, a box went out to somebody, and they introduced you to somebody else that owned a major leadership company that bought 10,000 copies of the book before the launch. How did that impact the launch?
You know, it changes everything you think about scale just goes out the window. Everything gets so much bigger. Your Amazon reviews, right? Go up. Frankly, you have to make sure you're working with a good publisher who can manage all of that, right? Can they actually print books? Can they have them in the right places? Are they ready for that? Thankfully, everything went off seamlessly on our end, or for this launch. But having those connections just makes a tremendous difference. Because you're going to make some mistakes launching this book. You're going to realize looking back, oh, we could have marketed this better, or we could have taken advantage of this opportunity. But when you have those connections who are willing to go to bat for you, and you have networks that aren't your own, I want to stress that to you. You're not going to know everyone. So you might be 1 degree away from somebody who can write you a check for 10,000 books. And that's game changing.
So I think the important takeaway from this, Dan, and this was a huge value bomb that got dropped on everybody, and I want to make sure that all of our listeners understand this, is you used a strategy that a lot of people call Dream 100. It was Chet Holmes that wrote the book originally and helped people to understand that. And essentially what Dream 100 is identifying a list of the ultimate people that can help your success and loving on them, sending them packages in the mail, in your case, the boxing gloves, but giving them enough value that they want to know who you are and keep adding to their lives without any ask, so that they will in return do something for you. If we look back at your whole bestseller campaign and hitting those lists, it looks to me from everything, all the notes I've been taking, what you've been telling me about, that probably is the #1 biggest takeaway. If you want to give advice to self-published authors today, what would it be?
So #1, write a good book. Don't be lazy. Write a good book. But that's an obvious. #2, I think, do your homework. One of the biggest fallacies out there is your publisher is automatically going to do all this for you. You don't want your publisher doing all this for you. This is up to you, right? To build your network. And if you don't, you might go, Dan, at this moment, I don't have a network. I don't even have a blog. That's okay. Sit down with a pen and paper and write out, like Ken mentioned, the Dream 100. What are 25 gurus in the space that you're writing? What are 25 authors? What are 25 leading consultants? What are 25 famous speakers in your space? Write their names down and then begin to learn a little bit about them, message them, reach out to them, ask for their help. By the way, the sooner you do this, if you're in the stage now where you're beginning to write, there's a perfect time. Build relationships with those people now so that when it's time to launch, you're ready to go. And then don't skimp. Look, I understand publishing can be expensive, marketing can be expensive at times, but don't skimp on this step. Save money. Stop drinking those lattes, put that money in the bank. Look, it costs me real money to write the book, to publish the book, to market the book. But you have no chance of being successful if you're not willing to invest in your own success. You can buy some Facebook ads and that'll work out for you great now, but that Dream 100 will be the thing that will help you skyrocket.
And so for all the listeners on the show, you can check out freebookadvice.com. Some of the things Dan's been talking about are on that website, and that information is there. We're also going to put everything Dan talked about, this amazing information, in the notes below this post, in the notes for the show. You're going to absolutely love it. Hey, Dan, a couple of things I want to make sure I get out of you. Obviously, a big part of you becoming an author was your whole childhood showing up and reading a lot and having that as an only option. But who's your favorite author? Who's the person that you want to emulate that gave you the most inspiration? You know, what's funny, I'm going to give you the wrong answer because I don't have one, but it's probably the book I just read. So Cal Newport's Deep Work is something I've been digging into recently. Probably in the last month, it's been my favorite. And it's been changing the whole way I think about passion and work. So I'll give you a report right now. Yay for Cal. Oh, fantastic. That sounds great. All right. So finally, you're giving away Edgy Conversations. And this is extremely impressive because we don't see a lot of authors that are doing this. But after selling tens of thousands of copies of this book, you've decided to give it away. You're giving it away. People are paying $7.95 for the shipping. And you're giving the book away. And I know in the notes here we have edgybookforfree.com. Why are you giving the book away now? Tell me about that.
So it's now time to give back, right? We sold a bunch of copies, way more than we ever expected. It's all over the world. It's been translated into a few different languages. I had a publisher in Korea reach out and say, look, we would love to translate it for my son. Would you mind if I made it available to everyone? And of course I said, sure. And, you know, we won't make a penny from that or very many pennies, but I realize it's impacting lives. And so I thought, what if we could do that now all around the world? We've got copies of the book. There's a lot of people who've read it, but there's many more whose lives would be impacted if they had the chance to see it. And so we're saying, look, we'll give you the copy. I'll probably sign it. I've signed most of them, and you pick up shipping, and it's on us. It's our chance to help you take that next level up in your game.
Hey, for those of you who didn't hear, I'll put the website in the show's notes as well, but it's Edgy Book for Free, just like it sounds like. Dan, it's been a real pleasure having you on Bestseller Confessions. I'm glad to have dragged the truth out of you. Any final words for authors around the world?
No, I would say write it. You know, write it. Do it. Don't procrastinate. You know, don't confuse perfectionism with procrastination. So if you haven't gotten started yet, just do it. There'll always be things you want to add. Just do it. Just get started. Make it happen. You won't regret it. I'll tell you that.
Dan, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. I really think the idea of the Dream 100 strategy that you used made all the difference in your bestseller campaign. And I hope that thousands of authors that hear the show decide to give that a shot because it's a winner. Thanks for being on Bestseller Confessions, Dan.
Thank you.
Bestseller Confessions is recorded at undisclosed locations across the United States of America. The names and identities of authors, self-published authors, publishers, and those scoundrel best-selling authors are hidden to protect the innocent.